There are few tactics in the theist arsenal more tiring than, well, you're just like me, so there. We've seen it all trotted out all the time, but it never works out well for the religious because it simply isn't true. So let's start a new series of sorts where we evaluate that for at least one claim. Doesn't that sound like fun? I think so, so stay tuned. This is the beginning of a long series of videos from a channel called JCO Journey. Now, I'm not going to be doing these every single week because that would be annoying. It's going to be more like whenever the hell I get around to it, maybe once a month, once every couple of weeks, I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and treat these like a Daniel King video and stop in every couple of weeks just to keep things interesting. JCO seems to think that atheists have a burden of proof, and at the moment, I've got 9 videos to get through, so let's go look at the first one and see what's what.
Atheists have a burden of proof. It's as simple as that.
Now, I know I'm jumping in here quickly without giving him an opportunity to explain. He will be able to do that in a second, but I just want to set this up properly. The burden of proof is gained when an individual makes a positive claim about a given topic. If you say, yes, X is true, or no, X is not true, then it's on your shoulders to show why that claim is actually correct. If you say, in my opinion, X is true, then you don't necessarily have a burden of proof because you are not stating that something is actually factually the case, only that in your view it is. And yes, your view can be wrong, and you really should be able to back it up, and nobody actually has to take your opinion seriously, so there is that. But I know that there are people out there who use that to get around supporting their own claims, and that is inherently dishonest, and people really ought to be able to back up why their opinions are valid. I just really wanted to get to the point where we understand that the burden of proof comes with positive claims. Not opinions necessarily, but positive claims. If you don't make a positive claim about something, you do not have the burden of proof. But we'll get further into this as we go on, I'm sure, so let's just get back to the video.
Liar.
Well, yeah, it's pretty clear that someone doesn't understand the burden of proof. So let me continue to explain just to get this all out of the way up front. Keep in mind that this is kind of this guy's entire shtick. Most videos on his channel, at least the ones I've looked at, are trying to force the burden of proof on atheists to the point that it's clear that he doesn't understand the concept. Anyhow, as I was saying, you have the burden of proof whether you like it or not. If you don't want it, then don't make positive claims. Atheists, at least most atheists, at least not in my experience, they don't make positive claims. We do not say that God's absolutely positively for absolute certain don't exist. That would be a positive claim, and that would incur a burden of proof. This is why the whole opinion thing often gets used. Someone will say, well, God isn't real. Great, well, how the hell do you know that? You have the burden of proof. And then they'll come back with, well, it's just my opinion. Okay, but that doesn't really change anything, does it? You should be able to justify your opinion. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be putting your opinion out there. And again, that's just kind of my position on it. There is a lot of wiggle room here, but I don't think you should be able to use your opinion as a way to get out of the burden of proof because it doesn't really work. There's really a big difference between saying, in my opinion, God isn't real, and saying, in my opinion, I really like chocolate ice cream. One is making a statement about actual reality. One is making a statement about your own preferences. They aren't really comparable, so we have to keep that in mind as well. There's a whole lot more to go into, of course, but we'll have to see where JCO goes next.
When talking about the existence of a God, a common misconception is that only the theist holds the burden of proof.
Oh, no, nobody!
No, it's the positive claimant, no matter what side they're on. Theists are saying that a god or gods, depending on the religion, are actually real. We have every right to ask them how they know that, and faith and fifis are not adequate answers. Now, that doesn't obligate you to answer. Intellectually, you should, but lots of people are not intellectual in their arguments. The person asking you to back up your claims will not be impressed or convinced by your lack of corroboration and will thus just walk away and think you're a loon. That's fair. It isn't like there's a jail somewhere that you get put into if you fail to meet your burden of proof. People will just think you're stupid. Yet this is why so many theists try to shift the burden of proof, as I suspect this guy is going to be doing, because they simply cannot meet their own burden and they don't want other people to think they're irrational and dumb, even though in a lot of cases they are. So they put on this production and pretend they don't have a burden of proof, or they try to distract by screaming, "Look over there," while they silently run away. And I'm sorry, I'll tell you right now, it just doesn't work that way. You look dumb if you fail. And a lot of these people just fail. So let's just go get back to JCO.
However, atheists may also bear this responsibility. This idea might surprise some, but it's essential to understand that in any rational discourse, anyone making a claim may need to back it up.
Yes, but it has to be a positive claim. X is true or X is not true. And in my opinion, you know how that goes, it has to be a claim about reality, about something outside of your own head. Anyone who makes a positive assertion must back it up to be considered credible. Saying, "Well, I didn't like that movie," or "I like chocolate ice cream," those aren't positive assertions about the world. They're just statements of preference. If you say, "I prefer if there is a God," yeah, okay, whatever. That's not making a positive statement about the state of objective reality. It's just saying, "I like it." Sure, whatever you say. I don't care. Now, I'll just get on about my day and pay you and your preferences no more mind because they're really irrelevant to anything of any validity. Now, you note that he says may, not does, may. I can certainly see in some circumstances where that can be true. The aforementioned atheists who do make positive claims about the existence of God, but that's a relatively small percentage of atheists in my experience, and his series isn't "Some atheists may have the burden of proof," because I would absolutely agree with that. And if anybody's been watching the channel for any amount of time, I call atheists who do make positive claims in the comments out on their positive claims. And so far, at least, every single one has failed to meet their burden of proof. So, some probably do deserve to be called out for it. I don't think it's a lot, but some certainly do. So what?
The purpose of the series is simple: to explain what burden of proof is, and to demonstrate that atheists may have to provide a burden of proof if they want to hold their position irrational by others, or at least themselves.
We'd have to see the specifics because the devil is in the details, and it seems a bit strange to make your entire channel, or close to it, about this one very specific topic. I see this in a lot of theists who just use it as a dodge to avoid their own burden because they simply cannot meet it. So let's do some more explanation since he at least hints at it. Any positive position has an inherent burden of proof, and anyone can ask for it at any time, even if it's a mundane claim. There's no floor beyond which people aren't allowed to ask. If you say you have a dog, people can ask you to see pictures of your dog. If you refuse to provide one or haul the dog out for examination, then people are free to reject your claim. There's no standard here. It's just what people want to insist on support for, and that goes for the individual as well. I get to choose what I demand evidence for, not you. You have no say in the matter, and that seems to confuse a lot of people.
By understanding this concept, we can ensure that discussions about the belief and disbelief of the non-existence or existence of a God remains fair and intellectually honest. Understanding the burden of proof is crucial for maintaining rational and productive conversations.
I agree. We just need to see some examples because I'm willing to bet that there's a whole lot more shifting of the goalposts here than he'd be willing to admit to. Even if atheists, some atheists, have a burden of proof, that doesn't do away with your own burden over your own positive claims. And that's something that I have to continually explain. Pointing fingers at others doesn't remove your own burden to back up your own claims. You need to do that regardless. So saying, well, they aren't proving theirs doesn't mean you don't have to prove yours. So this is really kind of silly, especially in an extended series, because I'm not seeing him or really any other theist backing up their own claims with anything remotely resembling evidence. So much of this is just, well, you can't prove me wrong, so I just have to be right. And I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way.
Without it, discussions can become one-sided and unbalanced. By acknowledging that both theists and atheists have responsibilities in these discussions, if they choose to have these discussions, we can create a more respectful and intellectually honest dialogue.
Except you just shifted your own assertions. It started out with atheists may, and now he's at atheists do. And I'm sorry, but that's not how that works. This is incredibly common, though, as you might imagine, because they are trying to avoid meeting their own burdens by insisting that people who aren't making any positive claims at all suddenly share the burdens themselves. And that is not how this works. I have zero burden at all if I do not make a positive claim. In this specific instance, if I don't say gods do not exist, I have no burden to show that they don't. This is why you will never, ever, 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 ever see me saying that. Go through any of my videos. I don't think you'll ever find a single instance where I've ever made a positive claim about the existence of any god. I mean, I guess I could say that Bobo the tree god doesn't exist, but that's because I just made it up. There really was a tree once upon a time, at least until it got blown over in a windstorm, but the god part of it, that was never real. I invented it. I'm not crazy enough to believe that Bobo, as an actual god, ever existed. Beyond that, though, you're not going to find any positive claims about gods coming from me, because I have no burden of proof.
In this series, I'll try to delve deeper into what burden of proof entails, how it applies to both theists and atheists, why it's a fundamental aspect of rational discourse, and among other things. And I ask you to stay tuned as I explain my reasoning on these concepts, and I try to bring more clarity on this often misunderstood topic.
Most of the misunderstandings that I see come from the religious side. Yes, I have to explain things to some atheists too, but mostly it's a defense mechanism used by the religious to get to, but I really, really want it to be true. But that doesn't make it true, does it? So we'll go through his examples, which sound like they're coming in future videos, and that's completely fine. But we still see the religious insisting things because it says so in the Bible, or because it makes sense to me, or because I have the witness of the Holy Spirit and I hear voices in my head, or whatever, none of which are actually supported by any evidence. And that makes it kind of stupid. Just because you really believe it, just because you have faith in it, just because you really like it, that doesn't make it true. We spend a whole lot of time playing these ridiculous word games with these people, and it's not doing anyone a bit of good, is it?
Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Like or dislike, and comment how you feel.
You know, this was going to be a relatively short video, but this was just an introduction so I'm just going to jump into his second video too. So far, this sounds sort of reasonable, except for his jump from may have a burden to do have a burden. This is why it's so important to pay attention to the actual words that they use and not just let them rush past to get where they want to go. Words matter. So let's just jump to part 2.
A phrase I often hear is that the theist has to provide the burden of proof. Let's be clear, both atheists and theists bear the burden of proof for their claims.
Yes, if the atheist is actually making a positive claim, which in most cases they are not. Everyone bears the burden of proof for claims they actually make, not for claims the other side asserts that they're making. Now, I can only judge this on my own because I only get to speak for me, but so much of this typically is talking past your interlocutor and asserting things about them that aren't actually so. So I guess we'll just have to see where this goes. If the atheist is not actually making a positive claim, in this case about any gods, then they do not have any burden of proof. Learn to deal.
You serious?
Well, duh.
Except that is true. No positive claims means no burden of proof. I am not convinced by your claim is not a claim in and of itself. This is where the religious often go wrong because they can't imagine that everyone isn't just like they are. But we're not. We are reporting our reaction to whatever it is that you said. That is not in and of itself a claim. We're not saying you're wrong, or at least I'm not, and if I do, then I do have the burden of proof to back it up. Just because you want there to be a claim, that doesn't mean that there is one. Just because you interpret it as a claim, that doesn't make it one either. This is where the religious go wrong a lot. Big surprise there.
This principle is rooted in philosophical definitions of these terms and even in the lack theist terms, which we'll explore later.
Which is immediately where he's going wrong. You don't get to just assign positions to other people against their will. This is where philosophers get into trouble. You're welcome to invent a definition for you to use within your own specific circles, but out here in the real world, you don't get to tell others what they believe. Language is descriptive, not prescriptive. It describes how terms are actually used in reality by individuals, not how people must use them or else. Most atheists lack belief in gods. You telling them that they actually believe there are no gods is dishonest. This comes about a lot too because my book says a thing, and we don't care about your book. This is just the religious desperately trying to get back to their own emotionally comforting beliefs, and nobody outside of your little cult cares. So, speaking for myself, I am not convinced that any gods exist. I'm not stating that no gods exist. I don't care if you like that. Fuck you and fuck philosophy, because nobody gives a shit.
Throughout history, both theist and atheist philosophers have presented arguments to support their respective positions.
Which is great. My position is that no evidence has convinced me that the existence of gods is even a coherent concept, much less a demonstrated fact. I have no arguments to present because I have made no positive claims. I am only asking for your evidence because you are making the positive statement that gods are real, or at least the God you believe in is real. So, back it up. Of course, they can't, and that's the whole problem, because if they can't do it, they shouldn't believe it either. They shouldn't be basing their entire life around things that they have no corroboratory evidence to present. I've got nothing to support in this because I'm not taking a positive position on anything at all. I'm saying I don't believe you. That's it.
Theist philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and William Craig have provided robust arguments for the existence of a God.
No, they haven't. They have made complete fools of themselves and made faith claims that they simply cannot back up intellectually. If he was going to expect us to be anything like Craig, atheists would be saying, well, gods aren't real because I have the witness of the holy intellect, or something stupid like that. We are not saying that, and that's what the religious really want. They want everyone to be just like they are, so they don't have to pony up any proof for their beliefs. Except that's not how this works, is it?
On the other hand, atheist philosophers like Richard Dawkins and Graham Opie have offered compelling arguments against the non-existence of a God, or the existence of no God, or something like that.
Good for them. I am not them. I have no burden of proof whatsoever. In fact, you won't find me making any arguments against the existence of any gods because I am not making any positive claims. I am simply unconvinced by the claims and the arguments offered by the religious. Thus, I do not believe. Lack of belief is not a belief in the lack of gods. Learn to deal with reality. He's trying so hard to get to his point, but his point is ultimately stupid. Anyone can watch his video on YouTube. It's an open public platform, and he's really only trying to talk the already religious into believing this because it provides emotional comfort. It doesn't provide any factual reality, and that's what he needs. So I can already see this going completely off the rails, but hey, let's just keep going. I suspect it won't be long until he tries telling atheists what it is they really believe, entirely without consulting us. How long do you think that's going to take? Place your bets down in the comments.
Both sides have engaged deeply with the burden of proof. It's important to understand that the statement, the theist has to provide the burden of proof, is misleading.
No, it's not. Theists do have to provide the burden of proof because they are the ones making positive claims. Atheists, by and large at least, are not. He's just trying to shove all of us into the same box and say, well, because those guys over there do X, you do it too. No, I don't. I don't at all. You don't get to generalize about all atheists because you really wish we were all the same. But that's all he's really doing here, isn't it? It's why he's just making a fool of himself, as if that's any surprise.
Theists, in general, have already provided the burden of proof through various arguments and evidence.
No, you haven't. You have made claims. You have not backed them up sufficiently, and certainly not enough to convince atheists that you have the slightest clue what the hell you're talking about. Your arguments and claimed evidence are crap. Just because it convinces you, that doesn't mean it's going to convince us, because our standards are simply higher. We are not running on pure fifis and faith, as the religious near universally are. Or at least I haven't run into anyone on the religious side that isn't, and if you are, let me know down in the comments, because I'd like to have a conversation with you. I've been on a years-long search for a single theist or apologist or anybody who can set their faith aside and just deal with the demonstrable facts, and those people don't seem to exist. You haven't remotely met your burden of proof. You just really want to believe. But wanting to believe simply isn't enough.
However, whether an individual accepts this as proof that God exists is a different matter altogether.
You're right. You are absolutely right. Because the judge of the proof is the person wanting to be convinced, not the person who already believes. You're the one on my doorstep trying to tell me the good news. If you can't convince me of the rational veracity of any of it, then you've failed. Now, you don't have to care if I'm convinced or not, even though you've got the Great Commission. Matthew 28:18-20 doesn't tell you to go out and try to make disciples of all nations. It says to do it, not give it your best shot. Do it. And if you can't do it, you've failed. And sadly for the religious, they fail a whole lot more than they succeed. Apologists just make endless excuses for why they fail because I think they understand that in the modern world where standards of evidence are much, much higher and expectations are much more strenuous, that religion simply cannot rise to the challenge. They understand that failure is going to be a whole lot more common than success. More and more, it's near universal that they fail. And that says some pretty negative things about your religion, doesn't it? If it's that unconvincing to everyone around you, then maybe you're on the wrong side of reality. Maybe you ought to go and think about that some, because you are.
This distinction is crucial. Providing the burden of proof and accepting it are two separate issues. Both can be true simultaneously, especially in the case of philosophical discussions. Recognizing that both theists and atheists bear the burden of proof for their claims is essential for a fair and balanced discourse.
And there it is. I knew it was coming because the religious always give it a shot. It's not fair. They're not looking for honesty. They're not looking for reality. They just want things to be fair. But in the real world, fairness is rarely a thing. This is expecting fairness and not consistency. But consistency is all that matters. Anyone who makes a positive claim has the burden of proof to back it up. If you don't want to or can't, then stop making positive claims. Stop wandering the streets telling everyone that you pass that Godzilla is ravishing the city if you can't back it up. That's just common sense. If you can't support it, shut up. Of course, the religious can't do that. They're commanded to spread the word, even if the word is nonsense, and therefore they wind up feeling really, really bad about their constant failures. But that's your problem, not ours. Stop trying to rope us into your nonsense because we're not going to play that game. We're making no claims whatsoever. We have no burden of proof. You've got the rope and you're busy constructing the gallows, and that's nobody's fault but your own. We don't have to hang with you. We're doing what rational consistency demands. We don't care about fair because fair doesn't matter. We care about truth. Maybe you should give that a try.
Without this mutual understanding, discussions can become lopsided, with one side unfairly expected to justify their position while the other side remains unchallenged.
Because we've made no positive claims. It's always going to come down to this. If you want to debate the people making positive claims, feel free. Go find them, because that's not me, nor is it the overwhelming majority of atheists. We're just not. We are not making the claims that you want to project onto us. If you want to address your video series specifically to Gnostic atheists, go right ahead. You're going to get very little response because there really aren't a lot of those out there. But sure, nobody's going to complain if you do. However, by trying to insist that everyone is a Gnostic atheist, that is simply not the case. You're just proving just how dishonest and disingenuous you are, or how ignorant you are, take your pick. And that's not going to fly. We're still not doing what you're claiming we're doing, and we're still not concerned about fair. We're in it for the facts, and the facts simply do not support your side of the argument or your claims. We can't stop you from believing, and we're not trying to do so regardless, but you're still not convincing us. You're still failing in the Great Commission. That's a you problem, not an us problem. Maybe you should do something about it.
By acknowledging the shared responsibility, we can foster more meaningful and productive conversations about the existence of a God. In future videos, I'll try to discuss what the burden of proof is a little more in depth, but understanding these principles is a key to engaging in rational and respectful debates and discussions. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next installment of the series.
Sorry, but this is pretty much where I expected it to go. Keep in mind, I don't watch these things ahead of time, so I went into it just as blind as you did. Well, unless you saw some of these before, then I don't know what to tell you. So we'll come back probably with 2 more videos if they're all about the same length. I don't know, I haven't looked. in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, because I can't imagine that this is going to get any more fascinating. He's just trying to frame atheists in a way that isn't intellectually honest, because I'm sure he's tired of being on the hot seat all the time. A place that he put himself by choice, so he wants us to sit on the stove and simmer too. But no, we're not going to do that because we're not just like he is. We are not making positive claims about God, so at least by and large. And for the people who are, yeah, go ahead, have at 'em. That's fine. They've put themselves in the crosshairs, and you are welcome to go after them if you'd like, because I'll be right there with you. But I'm not doing that, and I have no burden of proof to discharge. I just don't. If you asked a wide variety of atheists, hell, go down, ask everybody in the comments, feel free, if they are making any positive claims that gods don't exist, the vast majority would say, nope. Okay, there are a few, that's fine. You go talk to those people, but there you go. Problem solved. Theists who are making that positive claim, they have the burden of proof. And the vast majority of atheists who are not, don't. Thanks for playing. Of course, that won't be the end of this, will it? And I looked and I see that he's now up to 11 videos in the series, and who knows if we're going to get that far. If he starts to get boring, I'm going to stop. You can let me know down in the comments how it feels, but we can go on for a little bit and just see how it goes. I just don't think it's going to be that impressive. I think it's going to be a desperation move toward fairness, and I really want you to be just like me, and that's not going to be impressive, is it?